Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving into the law of trespass. Now, this is about way more than just a sign on a fence. It's really the legal shield that protects your basic right to your own space and, well, your own stuff. So let's get right into it.
So let me ask you this. What do all these things have in common? A frisbee landing in your yard, someone stealing your parking spot, a tree branch from next door hanging over your garden. The answer? They can all, believe it or not, be a form of trespass. See, this area of law isn't just about big fences and no entry signs. It's about protecting our personal space from all those everyday invasions, big and small.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll look at trespass on your land. Then we'll cover what you can actually do about it. After that, we'll switch gears to trespass involving your belongings, your goods. And finally, we'll wrap up with the one core idea that ties this whole thing together: possession.
All right, part one, trespass on your land. Let's start with that classic image we all have in our heads, someone on our property who really shouldn't be there.
So let's look at the actual legal definition here. A couple of phrases really jump out: invasion of possession, and this is the big one: you don't need to prove actual damage. This is so important. It means the law protects your right to just have peace and quiet on your land for its own sake. The simple act of someone being there without permission is the offense. So how does a court decide if something is actually trespass? Well, it looks for these three key ingredients. Think of it like a recipe, right? You need direct interference, the person suing has to be in possession of the land, and there can't be any good legal reason, any lawful justification for them to be there. So what counts as direct interference? I mean, there's the obvious stuff, like walking onto the property, but it also includes staying put after you've been asked to leave, or even just throwing something, like a stone, into someone's yard. And this is where it gets really interesting today. The old principle was that you owned your land up to the heavens. But what does that mean now, with drones? Can a drone flying low over your garden be trespass? The courts are trying to figure that out right now, which just goes to show how these ancient rules have to adapt.
And here is maybe the most crucial point to get your head around. Trespass protects possession, not necessarily ownership. It's all about who has the right to be there right now. This is why a tenant who's just renting an apartment can sue a trespasser. They can even sue the landlord if they just waltz in without giving proper notice. Why? Because the tenant is the one in possession. They have the right to be left alone. And this brings us back to that third ingredient: lawful justification. This case about a car park is a perfect example. The court basically said, look, if you're a tenant in a big building, it's implied that you have a right to use the common areas, like the car park. Your lease gives you that justification. So parking your car isn't trespassing against the landlord or anybody else. It makes total sense. Okay, part two. Let's say someone is trespassing. What are your options? What can you actually do about it? Well, the law gives you a few different tools.
The most direct option is something called re-entry, or you could call it self-help. Basically, if you have the right to possess the land, you have the right to remove a trespasser. But, and this is a very, very important but, you can only use reasonably necessary force. You absolutely cannot go overboard. And there's this fantastic kind of dramatic old case that perfectly illustrates this, involving a golf club and its former gardener. So, let me walk you through what happened. The gardener's job ended. And when his job ended, so did his right to live in the little house the club provided. They gave him notice to leave, but he refused. At that very moment, he legally became a trespasser. So the folks from the golf club went in and they physically, but the court said reasonably, removed him and all his furniture from the house. And the court's ruling? They sided with the golf club completely. They had the right to possession, the gardener was a trespasser, and they used reasonable force. Their actions were totally lawful. It's a really powerful example of that right of re-entry in action. Of course, taking matters into your own hands isn't always the safest or most practical move. So what happens when you need the legal system to step in and help out? When you go to the courts, you've got a few main options. There's an action for ejectment, which is basically a formal, speedy eviction process. You can also sue for something called Mesne Profits. Just think of it as getting paid back for the rent or income you lost while the trespasser was using your land. And then there's this old one with a really weird name: Damage Feasant. This is that classic right to, say, hold on to your neighbor's cow that wandered into your prize-winning vegetable patch until they pay for the damages. All right, part three, trespass to your goods. So far, we've really been focused on land.
But that same core idea, that right to be left alone, also applies to all of your personal belongings.
Now, to understand this, we have to look at this really unusual case. After a man died, his sister-in-law was worried about theft, so she took some valuable jewelry from the room where he passed away and moved it to another room, she thought, for safekeeping. Her intentions were totally good, but it didn't end well. What happened was the jewelry got stolen from the new room, and the court found the sister-in-law was liable for trespass to goods. Why? Because her good motive, legally speaking, didn't matter. By moving the items without permission, she directly interfered with them. That act was the trespass, and because of that, she became responsible for the loss that happened next. Okay, this brings us to our fourth and final part, the core principle. Because at the end of the day, whether we're talking about land or goods, the whole point is to protect possession. Trespass is one way the law does that, but there are a couple of other related ideas that are really useful to know. This table breaks down the differences perfectly. Let's walk through it. Trespass to goods, on top, is about that initial interference, like someone keying your car. The middle one, Detinue, is about them wrongfully keeping your stuff. Say you lend a friend your bike and you ask for it back, but they just refuse to return it. That's Detinue. And finally, the most serious one is conversion. That's when someone acts like they actually own your property, like if they take your bike and sell it. And as you can see, the remedy gets more and more serious as you go down the list. So, when you boil it all down, whether it's your home or your car or your jewelry, the law of trespass and these related ideas are all designed to protect one simple but incredibly powerful idea. You have a right to be left alone with your property, free from anybody interfering with it without a good reason. And that leaves us with a final, really important question. This whole area of law was built for a physical world, a world of fields and houses and objects. But what happens now, in an age of drones, of digital data, of virtual spaces? What does it even mean to trespass? Can your data be trespassed upon? That is the huge challenge the law has to solve next. Thanks so much for joining us,